Good afternoon. It is Friday, September 20th, I believe. Or is it the 19th? I don't know. It's one of those days. And I am recording this talk for the Oblate Retreat, the Benedictine Oblate Retreat that's going to be held at St. Gertrude's in Cottonwood. I think I got all that correct. Next weekend. And so I will be posting this on my YouTube channel. And so I'm just going to let all my YouTube subscribers know that if you're watching this, it's a religious talk about some religious and Benedictine principles. And so if you're tuning in to my YouTube channel for my usual outdoor stuff, this is not that. You're certainly invited to watch the talk, but you're not going to see me out hunting or trapping. Okay, so my name is Pete Espil. That's actually my nickname. My full name is Jean-Pierre Espil. And I have been an oblate of the Monastery of the Ascension in Jerome, Idaho, since I think around 2007. I don't know if the date's exact, but Father Hugh didn't fact check me on it when I did this talk for the retreat down here. So we're going to go with that. All right. I currently work as a therapist at a local mental health agency. I've been doing therapy as a licensed clinical social worker for the last 7 years. Prior to that, I spent 13 years in full-time ministry for the Catholic Church. I worked as a youth minister in 3 different states, Utah, Idaho, and Tennessee. And then I also did 3 years in young adult campus ministry as the director of youth ministry at St. John's Catholic Center on the Idaho State University campus. Doing therapy the last few years, 7 years, I guess it is now. I didn't plan on doing this when I went to grad school to be able to be a counselor, but I sort of ended up becoming the trauma guy. So I do a lot of work with trauma survivors. A lot of my clients, I think the majority of my clients are still teenagers or young adults, but I do a ton of work with trauma survivors. So the topic that I chose, which I know Father Hugh probably fell out of his chair when he got an email from me saying I would do this topic, but I chose the topic of peace. And I will be the very first person to admit that peace is not a subject that I would have chosen or even been remotely qualified to speak about until about, well, now it's been about 6 years ago or so, 7 years, maybe more. Yes, even, wow, time flies. Holy cow, I can't believe it. Yeah, so I had some major medical issues that started happening to me while I was working at St. John's at ISU. And they knocked me down pretty good for about 1.5 years. And I don't want to make my talk about that, but just to kind of put into perspective, I had a bunch of neural tension type problems with my arms and shoulders, neck. And then I had some jaw issues that they ended up diagnosing me with trigeminal neuralgia. It's called the suicide disease, and it's very painful. And I kind of dealt with this stuff for about 1.5 years. And I know a lot of the way I think about things changed during that time. And towards the tail end of it, when I didn't know we were at the tail end of it, but looking back, we were at the tail end of it. I kind of came to a place where I was at peace if I never got to do ministry again, if I never got to work again, I just was kind of at peace with whatever happened, based on a lot of things I studied and read and practiced while I was managing this pain and this time in my life. Today, I'm quite healthy. I do have to do some things to kind of keep my jaw healthy. I do manage some chronic pain in my arms and stuff, but it's nowhere near what it was. So I'm very grateful, and I believe it was a miracle of God's healing and of God's wisdom in directing me to the best care providers. So, but when I started thinking about peace, I'm going to do this topic. I think I can do this. I kind of flitted around in my head a little bit for a few weeks preparing this, trying to decide what I could use as an outline, because there were several things that I wanted to incorporate into a talk on peace. Some of them Benedictine, but some of them from other sources, religious and secular sources, and some of my own experiences, some things I came up with as I was trying to struggle through difficult times. And I'm sure they're not unique ideas. Someone else in history has probably written about them as well, but they were new to me. And so I kind of struggled to decide on what I could use sort of as an outline for this talk. And I settled on the Serenity Prayer. And I really like the Serenity Prayer. I was introduced to the Serenity Prayer in 2005 when I entered recovery for alcohol. I've been sober 19 years this last March. And I really like the Serenity Prayer. And I like the full text of the Serenity Prayer, not the abbreviated text, which is what many people know and use in recovery and elsewhere. But I use the full text. And so what I've done is I've taken this prayer line by line, and I've got a few kind of ways to dissect it line by line that point us towards peace. Will we ever get there fully? I don't think in this life, but we can get close. So the first line of the Serenity Prayer is, God grant me the serenity. There could not be a more perfect opening line, because this tells us, number one, peace begins with God. Without God, we will not know true, lasting, authentic peace. Peace has to begin with God. If we're going to cultivate the virtue of peace, then it has to be a journey that we ask God to take us on. Okay? However, because peace is a gift from God in a sense, then it's a gift that he can offer, but we have to play a role in receiving it, or we have to play a role in developing it and practicing it. Because I don't know about y'all, but I have never once in my life, even with my healing, had God just go, zap, here's the answer, you're better, or here, you have this virtue now, you're miraculously patient now. It just doesn't work that way. And I think Catholic theology bears that out very clearly in general. It's one of the reasons that I'm a Catholic. And so it's got to be something that we play a role in. If we want to live a life of peace, we have to practice some things. So in the first line, it says, God grant me. So it's a request. So the first line teaches us that we can ask for help. Specifically, we can ask for God's help. And this is something that we need to make a habit of. If we want to be at peace, we need to be willing to daily ask God to intervene, to be with us, to guide us, to strengthen us, to direct us. A lot of my prayers in the morning after I do the office are things like, God, okay, I'm here. I'm showing up for work. Point me, point me where you want me to go here. And then as I know your will, tell me how to do it. Give me what I need to do it, right? And so it's okay to ask for help, right? But if we want God to come help us, we have to be willing to do some things or not do some things, to give some things or to let go of some things. So Hippocrates said, before you heal a man, ask him if he's willing to give up what made him sick. And it's really silly of us to go before God and say, God, grant me the serenity, in my life that I need, but I'm not going to change anything that I'm doing. I'm just going to keep doing everything I already do, but I'm just going to expect you to somehow bless that and make it serene and peaceful, right? It doesn't work that way, okay? Not the God I worship. Second line, here we go. To accept the things I cannot change. All right. what does acceptance mean? Man, this word gets bandied around today in society. It gets misused regularly. It gets misused by people on, like, politically, both on the right and the left. It gets misused frequently in my profession of mental health care, specifically among social workers. And here's what acceptance means. Acceptance means acknowledgement of what is. Okay? Doesn't mean I like it or not like it. It doesn't even mean I have to, my opinion about it doesn't even matter. It just means this is. This is a thing. So one kind of extreme example I use sometimes is child abuse, right? I do a lot of trauma counseling with child survivors of severe abuse and severe sexual trauma and sex trafficking, all kinds of stuff. And I accept that stuff happens because it does. I'm not okay with it. I don't like it, but my opinion about it doesn't change the fact that it happens, right? So acceptance is when we are mature enough to acknowledge something that is a reality. That's acceptance. So we're asking God, help me to accept what is, right? Because I can't change it. And specifically help me to accept, to acknowledge what is, or what are those things that I cannot change. Right? This is a very profound line in this prayer. So we're kind of like, if we had to translate it down, it'd be like, help me to acknowledge the reality and the existence of those things of which I have zero power over. See? Now, that takes a mature soul to ask for that, and an even more mature soul to recognize it as God reveals those things. You know, what are the things we can't change? So before we move on to the next line, let's decide that. And this is really easy. I say this daily in counseling with clients. The only thing you can change is yourself. And I get clients, well, no. The only thing you have power over is your own thoughts, emotions, and actions. That's it. You don't have power over anything else. To some degree, you have some power over physiological processes, but it's debatable how much. But that's it. You don't have power over anything else. Some of us have some limited control over our circumstances, which is nice. For example, if I decided I didn't like the agency I was working for, I could probably find another agency to work for, you know, or whatever. If I don't want to live in Twin Falls anymore, I move to Kimberly. You know, I don't know about right now. The housing market is crazy, but anyway, we have some limited control over circumstances, but by and large, all we can control is ourselves. And so if you want to get on the path to peace, that's a biggie. That's a big reality check, because you got to tell yourself, you got to remind yourself, like, I can control over that. I can control over this. I can control how I respond to it. Viktor Frankl, the noted Austrian psychiatrist who was imprisoned by the Nazis and put in Auschwitz, the infamous death camp, and he survived it till it was liberated. And he wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And what he said, one of his many brilliant quotes, was, the last of the human freedoms that can never be taken away from any man is the ability to decide his response in any given set of circumstances. So I may not have control over what's happening around me, but I can always control my response to it if I choose to. Peace starts right there. See, we acknowledge what we can't change. We recognize what we can change. This guy right here, I can change this guy. And that starts with how I choose to respond to whatever is facing me every day. I have that power. All right. Next line. Courage to change the things that I can. Powerful line. I don't think this is as powerful as the first two, but it's powerful. So when I think of like courage, it's a lot of times it's a virtue that gets defined kind of as when you're afraid, but you go anyway, right? So when someone says they're not afraid, it's like, well, I don't believe that. But second of all, if no one's ever afraid, then we never get to be courageous or brave, right? So courage, when you're afraid, but you go anyway. I like that. And when I think about it that way, it like stirs up memories of like things that happened when I was in the Marines, or like how I felt before boxing matches or stuff like that. But see, those are certainly times to be courageous and brave. However, I think when we limit it to that, we miss a big part of courage, because it's also, it takes extreme courage to change yourself. It takes extreme courage to look at yourself and go, whoa, this is not good. My behavior here is not good. The way I think about these things is not good. Whatever, the way I treat that person, the way I respond to this, the way I treat my family or whatever is not good, right? And so that takes courage, to do any kind of personal inventory. And then it takes a lot of courage to change ourselves for the better. And it takes tremendous courage to stand up for other people and to practice acceptance in extraordinarily difficult situations and amidst tremendous suffering, right? So remember, we're asking God for the kind of courage that it takes to not only do maybe difficult physical things, but to endure terrible circumstances. And that's the kind of courage that helps us change the things that we can. And what can we change? This. That's it. Okay? All right, let's move on. And the wisdom to know the difference. So, wisdom, man, that's a big one. That's one that I'm not ready to speak on yet because I'm not quite qualified. Here's what you'll find out why I'm not qualified to speak on wisdom yet. All right. So wisdom is a virtue. It's defined as a virtue. It's a great virtue. It's one of the gifts of the Spirit. And I had a spiritual advisor tell me one time, and I'm not going to tell you who, but he was a monk, Benedictine monk, and he said, wisdom is okay. He said, knowledge plus experience plus maturity equals wisdom. For a long time, I thought I was pretty wise because I had knowledge and I had experience, but I didn't have the maturity, right? And it doesn't matter. You can have knowledge and experience. Maturity is not necessarily an age thing. I mean, it is to some degree. I don't think that we would ever be able to call, a 16-year-old mature regardless of what they endured. I'm sorry. The brain's not even developed. The brain doesn't finish developing until you're 27. So I think maturity could I think you could label someone as mature somewhere between early 30s up till their deathbed. And I think some people never get mature. They're never mature. But knowledge and experience alone is great, but you got to have the maturity for you to be wise, and so that's why I don't think I'm still quite qualified to speak on wisdom. Maybe in 5 years at another retreat, I'll be like, okay, I'll do wisdom now, but I'm not, I don't think I'm quite there yet. So wisdom is slow and it's contemplative, very Benedictine. It's cautious. It changes slowly out of caution and prudence. It's not impulsive. It requires rational thought. Wisdom is not an emotion. In fact, if emotion is in control, we are not wise. Period. I don't care who you are or what you're doing. If your emotions are governing your decisions, you're not wise. In fact, you're very immature. Okay? To control our emotions, we have to be in control of our thinking. And once we're in control of our thinking all the time, then we start to recognize we're gaining some wisdom. We're gaining some maturity, and we can start practicing wisdom more, okay? And I'm way better than I was 20 years ago, I'll say that. But I have my moments, where I get something that irks me a certain way, and I kind of do the Peter thing, and jump in. I'll go to the cross with you, Lord, and not realizing that I just stuck my foot in my mouth because in a couple hours the cock's gonna crow, and I'm going to be over there by the campfire pretending I'm somebody I'm not. So anyway, if we can control our thinking, then we can control our emotions. We can control our actions. We've gained a level of maturity that can start to allow us to practice wisdom. And our thoughts are important. And so I talk about other sources. I'm a big fan of the Stoic philosophers. And Marcus Aurelius was noted as saying, our life is what our thoughts make it. And that's a pretty profound statement too. Our thoughts color everything, don't they? How we think about things going on around us is going to dictate how we feel about it and how we respond. And even St. Paul, I think, was a bit of a Stoic when he talks about spending our time thinking on things of good report, virtuous, and the whole verse. I can't remember. I didn't write it down. I should have, huh? But he talks about spending our time thinking on good things instead of other things, right? And that's a very Stoic kind of thing. It's controlling your thinking in order to control your life, right? All right, let's move on. Now, we've just finished the first part of the prayer that most people stop there. That's the only prayer they know. Okay? But the next line is living one day at a time and enjoying one moment at a time. Ooh, wonder why that's important. Well, I remember when I was in the midst of my medical struggles, I would be laying in bed and I have these books. I always have books stacked up on my nightstand that I'm in various stages of completing, and I don't ever read one book at a time. And there was this book that my brother had sent me as a Christmas gift that I had not read, and it had just sat there on my nightstand for over a year at this point, I remember. And I kept praying every night. I'm like, God, give me the tools to manage my suffering. Give me the tools to manage this test that I'm in right now. Give me the tools that show me what you want me to learn from this pain. There's got to be something good we're taking out of this. So what do you want me to learn here? And as I would pray, I would always glance over at this book that my brother had sent me. And now my brother's not a believer. He's an atheist. And he lives in California, and he works as a clinical psychologist at Stanford. So he's a very smart guy, but he's not a believer. But he always sends me books that he thinks I'll like, and I usually do like them quite a bit. He had sent me this book, and every time I'd be praying for God to give me tools, I'd kind of look over and see this book, and I'd think to myself, I should read that. And I'm like, oh no, I better just stay in my Bible, or stay in the Rule, or stay in the Imitation of Christ, or these other kind of contemplative kinds of things. And one day I'm like, I always look over at that book, and maybe that's God trying to tell me something, so I need to read this book. And I read it. Fantastic book. It's called Deep Survival: Who Lives, Who Dies, and Why. And it studies all these different qualities of survival that people have who endure extraordinarily difficult situations that most people would perish in. Everything from being lost at sea to lost in the mountains to, dealing with cancer treatment, or, just all these things. And what's different about people who live from the people who die? What makes them different? Why do some people live and some people die? And it gives these rules for survival. And I use these rules with clients to this day. It is one of the best books I've ever read. It's by Lawrence Gonzalez, if you want to look it up. And in the book, he says the first rule of survival is be here now. Don't be in tomorrow. Don't be in yesterday. Don't be in 3 years from now, 10 years from now. Don't be in chapter 12 of your life story when you were 12 years old. You need to be right here, right now, when you're in a survival situation, right? If you want to survive, that's where you got to be. So it's mindfulness, isn't it? Right? Mindfulness means being fully present to the moment, right? Being fully present to the present moment. Okay. It's not some hoodoo-y thing. It doesn't involve holding crystals and chanting something. That's not mindfulness. That's garbage. Mindfulness means I'm here right now, fully present to what's in front of me. Okay. And to survive a difficult, trying situation, that's rule number one. And that is some powerful stuff, man. That is some powerful stuff. When you get stuck in the future, or if you get too far into the future, you get anxious. It produces anxiety. All my clients who come in who are anxious all the time, they're always worrying about stuff that's coming up. And they're missing it in the moment. Like, how are your kids doing? I don't know. I don't have time to worry about my kids. We got this. I'm like, dude, your kids need you right now. They don't need you tomorrow. They need you right now. When we worry about test results that are coming back, then what we do is we rob the joy of every single day leading up to when we find out those test results. We just wasted all these days of our life being anxious about something that we have zero control over. We don't have any data to support the worry until we get the test results. So why are we worrying about it? See what I mean? And then when we get stuck in yesterday's, when we get depressed, because we can't go back. We can't go back and fix stuff, or we can't go back to the way things were, or the way things used to be. So we get depressed. So part of the key to peace, right, is to be still and know that he is God. And so I will give today what today has. Jesus talked about this. He says, sufficient for today are its own problems. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Sufficient for today are its own evils, right? So even Jesus talked about this. This is huge. This is not some new agey thing. This is as old as the Psalms and older. Okay? So we have to learn to be fully present to the moment. We can be at peace in the midst of chaos if we can be fully present to one thing at a time. So even in the midst of chaos, when I have clients who come in to meet with me and are in crisis, it goes the same way every time. They sit down and for 30 minutes, they just word vomit everything that's out of control in their lives. And they want to know how to get control of it. I say, look, when you're in control of yourself, that's when you're in control. When you start trying to control everything that's going wrong in your life, that's the first sign you're out of control. Because you only have control over this. So if you want to get through all these crises that you're dealing with right now, get control of yourself and be mindful to solving one thing at a time. But what if I do that and all this? It doesn't matter. You can't fix it all at once. All you can do is triage. You pick the most urgent thing and you go, okay, I'm going to be fully present to solving that right now. And when that's done, I'll go to the next thing, right? But you're not going to fix it all at once. So you could be at peace in the middle of chaos as long as you are mindful to one thing at a time. Okay? Little side note, I have a lot of friends who served in special ops and stuff like that in the military. And I was special in the military, but I didn't get to serve in special ops. My mom called me special too. That's a whole nother story. But even in special ops, what they talk about is when they have a mission to do, they train and rehearse that mission over and over and over and over and over again until the mind forgets and the body remembers. And then they can go into that mission. And as long as they stay focused on one step at a time to that mission, they don't think about the end. They think about next objective, next objective, next objective. They finish this objective. What's the next objective? Get to that. Finish that. Now, what's the next objective? One thing at a time. And that's how they bring it home alive. But where would they be if one person's thinking about what they're going to do at the very end when they have to get out back to the helo, and other people are thinking about what just happened, 10 minutes ago when they breached the wall, and someone else is thinking about what he's going to do next month when he goes on leave and marries his girlfriend, and someone else is thinking about, right, death. They're going to die. Someone's not going to be in the moment, and someone's going to get hurt. See what I mean? So one objective at a time in the midst of chaos, and you can be at peace. Takes some practice, though. Next line, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace. Whoa, what is that? What is that? I think that's the reason that line right there is the reason why you don't find the entire text of the Serenity Prayer in a lot of Protestant resources. Because many non-Catholic Christian churches do not like the idea of suffering being part of God's plan for us and as a path to peace. They don't see suffering as having purification value, which is where the doctrine of purgatory is rooted. See what I mean? So we got to learn to accept as a reality that it is real and true, acceptance, acknowledgement of what is. It is real and true that hardship is the pathway to peace. Well, how can that be, Pete? That doesn't make any sense at all. Well, I'm going to throw a couple things at you, and then I'm going to give you the short answer. First of all, Viktor Frankl, who I already spoke about, he said he created this idea that there's this thing called the tragic triad. So the tragic triad is suffering or pain, guilt, and death. We're all going to face suffering, guilt, and death. And what sets some people apart in those situations is the people who can draw meaning from it and learn from it and find value in it because of how it helps them grow. I'm a better person. And everybody who knows me personally will tell you and agree that I am a better person because of the medical stuff I went through. It changed me for the better because I've let it and practiced doing it. Okay? And I remember in a talk I gave, I thought it was going to be the last ministry talk I ever gave because I had a really hard time talking with, my jaw hurt so bad. And it was at a Theology on Tap up at St. John's. And I gave a talk on suffering. And I said, at one point in my talk, when I was talking about some of these survival skills, that I just mentioned one, but I was going through the tools for surviving suffering. And I said something like, I have friends come up to me, and the talk's on YouTube. It's Pete Esbill, Making Sense Out of Suffering, if you wanted to watch it. But I said, I have some friends come up to me and say, well, what if you do all this work to change and you don't get better? And I said, well, good. Then I'll have the tools to endure the suffering the rest of my life. And what if you do all this work and you do get better? Well, good. Then I'll be a better person and I'll have new skills that I needed that make me better. You know, they don't just make me better to endure suffering. They make me better as a person. And I'm a different person, right? So hardship as the pathway to peace. So Viktor Frankl talked about that. Second of all, Christ tells us in the Gospel of Matthew to rejoice when we're persecuted. Why? Well, the answer we get in Sunday school a lot of times is, oh, because it means you're doing the right thing or whatever. And it's like, well, I kind of think of like, well, if I'm being persecuted for what I'm doing, then what I'm doing must be really hard. I'm going to come back to that. St. Thomas More, my number one favorite saint in the whole world. I die the king's good servant, but God's first. Man, St. Thomas More, what a guy. Anyway, he said that suffering is a gift that God only gives to his closest friends. You know? So you kind of think about that when you're going through suffering. You're like, wow, Jesus, I didn't know we were this close. You must really like me to give me this suffering. And part of that, when you do that, it changes how you think about it, doesn't it? Okay? But if we go back to like what I said about Jesus, that rejoice when you're persecuted. Why? Well, because it means you're doing hard things. Well, why is it important to do hard things? I'm gonna throw this at you. Some of you may know where I'm going, some of you may not, but get this. We never, ever grow when we are comfortable. Literally grow physically, you know, or emotionally or psychologically. We don't grow when we're comfortable. We grow from doing hard things. And we adopted a daughter 2 years ago. Her name is Amelia. She's awesome. But we have rules on our fridge. Amelia has 14 rules that we all came up with. And one of them, rule 8, is do hard things. And we always say that in this house, we do hard things. We'll be talking, she'll go, oh, this kid at school, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, I don't know how to handle that. And I'm like, what do you think? Well, I don't have to be their friend, but I should probably still treat them respectfully. I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, that's hard. And I go, yeah, I know. But in this house, we do hard things. She's a girl. She's an 11-year-old girl, and she competes in jiu-jitsu. That's a wrestling martial art. And at tournaments, she has to wrestle against guys. And as class, she has to wrestle against people who a lot of times are better than her, stronger than her. And it can be hard for a girl. That's a hard sport for a girl. You know, and when she starts having a hard time with it sometimes and gets a little discouraged, I'm like, sweetie, rule 8. She's like, yeah, we do hard things. I'm like, we do hard things. And you know, now there's plenty of neuroscience evidence that shows when you do hard, uncomfortable things that require self-discipline, you know, like dieting to lose weight or exercising to lose weight or learning a new language or, you know, anything that requires something from some discipline from you that makes you uncomfortable, there's a part of your brain that actually grows, and it's the part of your brain that's tied to the part of your brain that they think is where the whole will to live is centered in your brain. So you can make the part of your brain that has a stronger will to live bigger by doing difficult things. So maybe this whole idea that suffering has value, intrinsic spiritual value, and maybe there's something to that. I think the worst addiction is comfort. I absolutely despise it. I mean, I'm not wearing a hair shirt yet like St. Thomas More, but man, if I start feeling comfortable, I don't think I'm in God's will. Something to think about. If you're comfortable, are you really in God's will? Because You can be at peace and not be comfortable. See what I mean? So I think that if the pathway to peace is hardship, then if we're comfortable and we're not enduring anything difficult or doing anything that's difficult, even just spiritual discipline of prayer and fasting and almsgiving and that kind of stuff, if we're not doing things that are hard or difficult, I don't think we're in God's will. Might be an unpopular opinion, but it's my opinion. Taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would like it. Oh boy. I could think of over the years in different parishes I've worked in, I can think of quite a few church ladies that wanted things a certain way. And when they weren't, boy, you heard about it. I think when we want things the way we want them, I think it's pretty selfish. I think it's a sign of immaturity. And one of the things that having a daughter has really helped me practice is just kind of going with the flow. I'm kind of an on-time kind of guy. I'm a plan, let's stick to the plan kind of guy, And when you got a 9, 10, 11-year-old daughter, no, it's not going to go quite the way you were hoping, My daughter's bow hunting this year with me. And, I was one of those guys, get up really early, get out there, get ready, blah, blah, blah. And man, things just take longer with a daughter. And I just have to be okay with the fact that we may not get out there as quick as I want to. And she might make more noise than I want her to make when we're walking through the desert. And that's okay. She's learning. And it's just kind of let things go the way they are. I trust in God's will in this, that I'm teaching my daughter skills and habits and hobbies that she can enjoy for her whole lifetime instead of ruining them for her by being too rigid about how they need to happen. So if we follow the example of Christ, he didn't force anything. He preached the kingdom of God. And he invited people to follow him. And when people didn't, he let them go. He didn't go and grab them and say, no, you made the wrong decision. Get over here. You think about John chapter 6, a whole bunch of his followers left him when he preached on the bread of life. And he didn't say, no, guys, come back, please. I'll answer that a different way. I'll do something to keep you here. It's like, no, it's your choice. Come, stay or go. He even turns to his apostles. You guys going too? And of course, we know their response. No, where are we supposed to go? No one's got anything as good as you do, even though it's hard. All right. Trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will. Trust. Trust is a tough one, but trust, I always say, is the first cousin of faith. People who have a hard time with the concept of faith, I start to ask them, well, who do you trust? Nobody. That's not true. You ever ridden in the car with somebody? Well, you trusted them, and you trusted other drivers to follow the law, and you trust other drivers to follow the law when you drive, and you trust your doctors when you go in, and you trust your dentist, and you trust all kinds of people without even realizing it. If you can trust, you can have faith. We just take it up one step, right? Well, we're going to trust that the God who created me, the God who made this whole universe and all beyond it, and put us on this little tiny rock, and somehow we're able to speak and call out to that God, wherever he is, everywhere, right? That God didn't do all this with no purpose, right? And so I have to trust that God will make all things right in his time, as long as I'm willing to surrender to his will and say, okay, God, I'll go that way if that's what you want. Doesn't make any sense to me, but okay, I'll go that way. And here's the cool thing about maturity. The more you're able to look back at your life and go, oh, that's why that happened. Oh, that's why that happened. Oh, that's why God did this. That's why I ended up in that position, in that place I didn't think I wanted to be. Because now we start to recognize how God's will is at work when we're open to it. Okay? Now, we're not always going to look back and go, oh, that was easy. No, there's a lot of times it's like, wow, that was a really hard thing I had to do right there. But that's why I had to do it, because then this thing, see, that whole hardship is the pathway to peace. If you're looking for peace by being physically, mentally, emotionally comfortable in your little bubble with your bonbons and TV or whatever, it's like, that's not being in God's will. If you're in God's will, you're going to be challenged. He's the perfect father. I always say this, like, watch parents on the playground with their toddler or their 4-year-old, right? the 4-year-old's climbing up the jungle gym, and he gets out on the monkey bars, and he gets stranded. He looks down, he sees how high it is, he's holding on, he doesn't know what to do, and he looks to his parents. And 9 times out of 10, the mom goes, ah, she's going to run over there, right, to save him. And dad grabs mom and goes, wait, let's see if he figures this out. He's not going to get hurt. Just let's see if he figures this out. And mom's like, mom's having an anxiety attack. Dad's like, just let's see. See, that's our Father in heaven. He hands us hard stuff if we ask to be in his will. And before he comes flying, sending the Spirit in to save us, or guardian angels or whatever, he goes, wait, I'm going to see if I think they can do this. I know they can. It's just whether they choose to or not. Let's see how they handle it. And then we handle it, right? And then God goes, yeah, I knew he could. I'm going to give him something bigger, right? Okay? So that's huge. That's so important. It's the same deal I have with my daughter. I always tell her, I'm like, Sweets, I call her Sweets. I'm like, you got to trust me. Remember, we have a deal. I will never put you in a situation that I don't think you can handle. You may not always win, but you'll be able to handle however it goes down. So my job is to prepare you for these difficult situations, and then I'm going to let you handle them because I believe you can. And if there's a situation transpiring that I don't think you're ready for, that I don't think you can handle, that's when I'm going to be the dad who steps in and goes, no, not yet. Not yet. You're not ready for that yet. See, that's our God in a great bigger way, way better way. But I think that's the closest we can kind of get to it as an example on this earth, like as a parent, right? So we got to trust God. We got to have faith that God will make things work out the way they're supposed to. And our job isn't to know how all that's going to go down. Our job is just to go, okay, I'll walk down that road. Now, I think we can only be at peace when we're in God's will. True peace. So if we're not at peace, I don't think we're in God's will. And that doesn't mean you're like lost or something. It just means that maybe you need to spend some time going, okay, God, I thought I was in your will all this time, but man, I'm just not really, I don't have any kind of an inner peace about any of this. So am I where you want me to be? Put me where you want me to be. That's a fun prayer. Buckle up if you say that. But put me where you want me to be. If you are dealing with anxiety, worry, depression, anger, jealousy, or attempts to control anything but yourself, those are not pathways to peace, and those are not God's will. Anxiety is not God's will. Depression is not God's will. Anger and jealousy, control of others, that is not God's will. And completely goes against our free agency to love freely or reject freely, right? So those are some things to consider. Last line of the prayer is that I may be reasonably happy in this world, reasonably, and supremely happy in the next. Well, let's define what happiness is, right? Because here's my thing. I don't believe we were created to be happy. Now, some Dominicans usually get mad at me for saying that because in Thomas Aquinas' writings, he talks about the ultimate goal of every human act is, that's good is happiness, right? But I think that's happiness in the next life. What is ultimate happiness? Well, heaven, right? With God, with Jesus. Eternity with our King, Jesus. But I don't think that means we're supposed to be happy here all the time. I think we could be at peace. I think we can be content. I think we can be fulfilled, right? I think those are all, yes, absolutely. Not all the time, always, necessarily on some of those. We may not always be content, but I think, we can have those things. And this prayer says, reasonably happy. Well, isn't that about the best we could expect in a fallen world? Yeah, I think reasonably happy. If I'm doing something I generally enjoy doing and I'm in God's will and I'm overcoming things that I have to face and I'm living a sacramental life and I'm we're reasonably happy. We have moments of joy and happiness and things like that. But like when people go, well, do whatever makes you happy. No, I think that's terrible advice. If I did whatever I thought would make me happy at any given moment throughout my life, I don't think I'd be here at 50 years old today. I probably wouldn't have made it past my teenage years. And if I did, I'd probably have a in and out of prison, and there'd probably be some people that were dead in my path, because sometimes it would make me very happy to strangle this person in front of me. Earthly happiness, right? But see, God's not about earthly happiness, right? God's about celestial happiness, eternal happiness. Like, what's the goal? What's our purpose, right? To know, love, and serve God. That's what we're created for, right? So knowing and loving and serving God in a fallen, sinful world, boy, that's going to be hard, isn't it? I mean, it's not always going to be doing what makes us happy. It's going to be doing what's right, So be careful. If you think that you're only at peace if you're happy, then I think you're chasing the wrong peace. I think you've defined peace erroneously. Okay? All right. So I have this little thing at the end I do. It's called the pathway to peace in short form. Faith in God, trust in His will, acceptance of hardships and sufferings, practicing mindfulness, letting go of attempts to control anything but yourself, prayer, participation in the sacraments for grace, connection to good people and fostering good relationships, forgiveness, and setting boundaries for your own behaviors or to guard your peace from those who might disrupt it. We're not obligated to be in close relationships with toxic people. Sometimes we have to set boundaries to protect ourselves and to protect our own mental health and our own sanity. There's a quote that says, just because you're friends in drama doesn't mean you have to attend the performance, And so I think boundaries are really an important clinical part of a pathway to peace. I have to have some boundaries. If they're toxic people trying to hurt me emotionally or anything else, I have to set boundaries with those people. And also, it's okay to set boundaries. Just this last thing I want to say about boundaries, I said in my talk when I gave this before, but it's okay to set boundaries to avoid, so that you don't have to enable somebody's toxic behavior. Like, parents sometimes say, well, I feel like, I feel bad as a parent because my kid's struggling with drugs and he's 21 and living in this tiny apartment and he's got a drug addiction, but I feel bad if I don't give him money. Like, you don't have to give him money. Don't give him any money. If he's using it for drugs, don't give him any money. You can take him some food, but don't give him money. It's okay to have boundaries to prevent ongoing toxic behavior from somebody that's destroying them. Does that make sense? But I'm going to read that one more time, just the pathway to peace. Faith in God, trust in His will, accepting hardships and suffering, mindfulness, letting go of attempts to control anything but yourself, prayer, participation in sacraments for added grace, connection to good people and fostering good relationships, forgiveness, and setting boundaries. I hope you enjoyed my talk. I wish I could be up there to answer some questions or do this via Zoom, but as you're watching this, I will be out with my daughter bow hunting. However, you are more than welcome to call me or email me if you have questions. I'm not going to say my phone number or email on this video because this will be posted on my YouTube page, but you can get a hold of me by contacting Father Hugh Feiss at the Monastery of the Ascension, and he can put you in touch with me. If you need to get a hold of me and you want to ask me any questions or get my thoughts on anything. I also practice as a therapist in Twin Falls, Idaho. And so if you ever have somebody that needs therapy and they want to receive it from a Catholic, then feel free to send them my way if you'd like. And if not, that's okay too. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the retreat.